So, kita ke topik yang kedua untuk pagi ini. We are going to talk about feedback. Okay, augmented feedback. So, before we proceed, this is a concept of feedback. Okay, augmented feedback provide information that can facilitate skill learning. Okay, when you see term augmented here, it means that it being given to you by third party, orang luar. Okay, you have first party, which is your own self, and third party, which means by others than yourself. So with that, we can divide feedback into two. One is known as internal feedback or task intrinsic feedback, and second one is augmented feedback. Task intrinsic feedback is by your own self, your sensory, your sensor, and augmented feedback is a feedback helped by others. Means that it be given by either your coach, your opponent, the scoreboard, the surrounding, anything outside of you. That is augmented feedback. Okay, so these are the two type of feedback that can be given to an athlete. One, the most important one is task intrinsic. By your own visual, you see the scoreboard, you know where you're standing off. By your auditory, you hear people talks, you hear the ball coming. By proprioceptive, you sense, and also by tactile, the sense of touch. For example, when you kick a ball, when at the point of you hit the ball, you can actually determine whether the ball is going straight, the ball is going skewed by the feeling at your feet. Itu tactile, and that is actually task intrinsic feedback. And second type of feedback is known as augmented feedback or feedback by others, which can be divided into knowledge of result and knowledge of performance. Okay, we afterwards we are going to call it as KR and KP. So if we compare these two type of knowledge, this one will come first compared to result. Okay, knowledge of result is the outcome. Knowledge of performance is the execution. Ini dia. Okay, so knowledge of result is externally presented information about the outcome. Example, 100-meter sprint. You review your videos of running. That is knowledge of performance. Augmented, being given to you by video. Okay, that is knowledge of performance. And then you see the scoreboard. That is knowledge of result, the time. Itu beza knowledge of result and knowledge of performance. This is some other example of KR and KP. We take one sprinter. Tadi kita ambil sprinter. Okay, a student driver. KR, see the number of error. That is knowledge of result. KP dia, see a light flash each time he or she makes an error. Means it more towards the execution of the skill. That is knowledge of performance. As for knowledge of result, it is actually the outcome of the performance. Okay, and then this is some other type of knowledge of result. Okay, the first one is by the performer itself. My ball is on the green. How is it? Intrinsic feedback by visual. Dia nampak bola dia kena green. Tapi dia tak tahu dekat mana part of green. As this one said that your ball went in the hole. So this is augmented feedback. Okay, and it being given by others regarding the outcome. Yang belakang ni pula, your ball is on the green, the same as what she actually observed. This is what we call as redundant feedback yang bertindan, feedback yang sama being given to you more than once. Okay, so this is some of the similarities and differences between KR and KP. First one, KR and KP most of the time is usually verbal. Okay, and then it is in extrinsic. It is augmented, and it provide after the performance. While for the difference, KR is more towards the outcome, KP is more towards the execution. KR usually redundant with intrinsic. You don't need much of KR based on extrinsic ataupun augmented, because you can see, you can hear, you can observe by your own self. Tapi KP, no. Okay, sometimes when we are executing, we cannot determine how we execute that. So we need others to help. Alright. Next one is regarding issue related to augmented feedback. Means here is how we want to give the feedback. Is it giving error or is it giving correct is better? So if the audience is expert, giving them errors is better much more compared to correct. But if your audience is novice, give them the correct one because they tend to follow on. Okay. And then KR or KP depends. If your athlete is an expert, it is better to give them KR because they know how to execute the skill as best as possible. However, if your audience is a novice, give them KP, means way to conduct the action. Qualitative or quantitative, again, qualitative is more focused to KR, quantitative is more focused on KP. Augmented feedback based on error, nak bagi masa bila, error sikit ke error dah banyak. Same goes as erroneous augmented feedback. Feedback being given based on error rather than what is right. Okay, so in order to give feedback, there are two what we can say time frame. Okay, there are two time frame when we can give feedback. One is known as concurrent feedback. Means that feedback that being given to you while you are performing. Tengah main, coach bagi feedback. Means that you can do correction all the way. Tapi concurrent feedback most of the time will give two different outcome. Either it will give you negative effect or it will enhance. Sometimes if too much concurrent feedback being given to athletes during performance, it actually hinder the athletes to focus on the performance itself. So at the end of the day, you are going to get negative learning effect. Too much feedback, too much relying on the coach rather than executing the skill. However, if the feedback, if the concurrent feedback being given at correct time, it enhance skill learning because it helps you to readjust your performance in order to be better. Okay, and the second one is the feedback that being given after the performance, which is known as terminal augmented feedback. Feedback that being given after a person completed their performance. So for terminal feedback, it can be divided into two sub-interval. One is known as KR, delay interval, knowledge of result delay, means you perform, your coach know the outcome, and he just hold it for a while until you finish maybe the session, until you finish the take, until you finish the half, and then they give you the information about where you're standing off. Or post KR interval. Post KR ni KR that been given after finish the match. For example, post mortem. Tu post KR lah. Okay, and then as for the technique, in order to give, this will be the last part. Okay, so for the technique, in order to give feedback, these are the algorithm that people always follow. First, when you try to give feedback, ask yourself, is the learner experienced? Is it a novice? Is it a new player? Or is it an expert? If the answer is expert, sensory feedback is enough, it's ample. Intrinsic feedback is sufficient for the athlete to carry on the task. However, if the athlete is not experienced enough, okay, if the answer is no, and then you need to ask, is the task simple? If the answer is yes, the task is not that hard. Dribble je. That the task is simple. If the answer is yes, only provide feedback to the athletes when requested. Kalau athlete tak tanya, no, refrain yourself. Okay, because the time for you to keep on pounding with feedback is actually during practice. The time of tournament is the time for the athlete to perform. It is not the time for you to train. Kena ingat yang itu. Jadi kalau masa kita nak bagi feedback banyak-banyaknya, practice during that time. Same as what you have learned in university. Waktu kelas, that is the time where you ask about the outcome. That is the time where your lecturer gives you information. But during the test, that is what you're going to bring from the class and excel. It is not the time for you to discuss anymore. So provide feedback when requested. If not requested, refrain yourself. If the task is simple. But if the task is not simple, you may give feedback based on these 4 parameters. First, provide parameter feedback, provide on how to execute. Macam mana nak sepak curve, let them know this is how to sepak curve, refresh their mind. Or you can provide more precise feedback, be detailed. Ataupun yang ketiga, provide less frequent feedback. If too much feedback, sometimes it hinder performance because you make your athlete unable to focus. Or the last one, you provide feedback when requested, or you can actually add on add more than one parameters at one single time if the task is not simple. Sorry, if the task is not simple but the athletes know how to conduct that skill. But if the athlete does not know how to conduct the skill, this is the answer, you need to provide program feedback. In other words, you need to include that particular practice in that particular skill in your practice. Meaning that if all of this being answered as no, your athlete does not know how to execute the skill at first. You do not train the athlete to do so. So train them to do the program or to do the skill. Barulah kita boleh guna algorithm ni balik. Okay, that is how we want to give feedback, and that is the end of the second subtopic for today, which is regarding augmented feedback. And with that, thank you and see you again next week. Assalamualaikum and very good morning to all.